Welcome to episode 474 of the Selling Your Screenplay podcast. I'm Ashley Scott Meyers, screenwriter and blogger over at sellingyourscreenplay.com. Today I'm interviewing writer-director Carter Smith. He just did a really cool indie film called Swallowed. We dig into this film and how he was able to get it produced, as well as talking about some of his earlier projects, directing music videos and working as a professional photographer as a jumping off point to his film career. This film was shot in Maine, where he's from, so it's a nice template for creating movies far outside of the Hollywood system. So stay tuned for that interview. If you find this episode valuable, please help me out by giving me a review in iTunes or leaving a comment on YouTube or retweeting the podcast on Twitter or liking or sharing it on Facebook. These social media shares really do help spread word about the podcast, so they're very much appreciated. Any websites or links that I mention in the podcast can be found on my blog in the show notes. I also publish a transcript with every episode in case you'd rather read the show or look at something later on. You can find all the podcast show notes at www.sellingyourscreenplay.com/podcast, and then just look for episode 474. If you want my free guide, How to Sell a Screenplay in 5 Weeks, you can get that by going to sellingyourscreenplay.com/guide. It's completely free. You just put in your email address and I'll send you a new lesson once per week for 5 weeks, along with a bunch of bonus lessons. I teach the whole process of how to sell your screenplay in that guide. I'll teach you how to write a professional logline inquiry letter and how to find agents, managers, and producers who are looking for material. Really is everything you need to know to sell your screenplay. Just go to sellingyourscreenplay.com/guide. So now let's get into the main segment. Today I am interviewing writer-director Carter Smith. Here is the interview. Welcome, Carter, to the Selling Your Screenplay podcast. I really appreciate you coming on the show with me today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Hey, thank you. So to start out, maybe you can tell us a little bit about your background. Where did you grow up and how did you get interested in the entertainment business?
I grew up in rural Maine, very small town, and had always been, sort of fascinated by films and filmmaking, but grew up at a time when we didn't all have iPhones in our pockets, and sort of filmmaking felt like, it was a little bit out of reach. Like it required all this equipment and big crews, and so I started dabbling in photography, and that ended up being my sort of first career, a fashion photographer. Which was, about creating images and telling stories through imagery. And I didn't really come around to filmmaking until about 10 years later when I made my first short film.
Okay.
So it was sort of a roundabout way to come to filmmaking.
Yeah. And I'm curious, that's interesting. So for photography, I noticed on IMDb, you have a good number of credits as a music video director. And I'm curious, so that was the transition? You started doing shorts, or did you transition from photography to music videos?
I've done 3 music videos. I haven't done that many. So
okay.
It was never I wasn't one of those guys that did commercials and music videos. I was very much stills, and then films and short films. I mean, I've done there is actually another Carter Smith who is a music video guy who does a ton of them. So a lot of people are like, oh, I can't believe you did Jane's Addiction, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, that was not me. Different yeah. Carter Smith. And also because the films that I make are dark and horror and sort of twisted. And then my stills are pretty and commercial and, sort of accessible. There's a real kind of 2 sides of the coin thing that they don't relate to each other in a lot of people's eyes.
Huh, fascinating. So let's dig into your latest film called Swallowed. Maybe to start out, you can give us a quick pitch or a log line. What is this film all about?
It's about two friends who agree to deliver a package over the border into Canada and end up in this sort of backwoods hell of drugs and bugs and a horrific intimacy that kind of changes them forever.
Mm-hmm. And so where did this idea come from? And I'm curious, I noticed again on IMDb, you had a movie called Bug Crush as a short, one of your first shorts. Was that sort of somehow inspired for this? But just in general, where was this idea come from? What is the genesis of this?
Yeah, so Bug Crush was my first short, and that was adapted from the short story by Scott Trelevin, who was an amazing story, and it's a film that I love and I'm super proud of. And I'd always wanted to do something that was in the same universe. Bug Crush I shot in Maine with a kind of tiny little crew, and then went on to make some other sort of bigger films, and had always wanted to return to this sort of the world of Bug Crush and the sort of the rural dark Maine that I grew up in, that sort of inspired a big part of my love of horror.
Hmm.
But like writing the script, like it was very much a result of me saying like, okay, what's a film that I can make with, 5 or 6, 7 friends, and we can go out and we can do it, and we're not going to have to wait around for anyone else to finance it or to give us permission or to,
Hmm.
sort of, I'm not going to be getting notes, and I'm not going to be like I wanted to kind of avoid the traditional development process.
Hmm. So let's talk about that, the actual writing of the screenplay. Just in general, I like to get a sense of sort of writers, how they go about their business. And do you typically write in the morning? Do you typically have a home office? You go out to Starbucks, you need the ambient noise. Just sort of when you're in a writing mode, what does your day look like?
Yeah, so I mean, I start every day with morning pages, Julia Cameron's morning pages sort of routine. So I start with that, and then if I'm in a writing mode, I will try to go directly into a chunk of time devoted to screenwriting. But if it happens at night, then that I run with that. I'll take it wherever I can get it,
Hmm.
basically. But I wrote this. I was in Maine, and I was at my place. I was there alone, and it was very much like um, there wasn't a lot else going on, so I was really able to focus on it in a
Hmm.
way that I find more difficult in sort of the real world of New York or whatever else you know real life puts in the way of getting down to
Yeah,
the
yeah.
page.
And I'm curious, how much time do you spend? And we can use this film as a sort of an example. How much time do you spend outlining index cards, just writing notes, versus how much time do you spend in Final Draft cranking out script pages?
It's so funny because like this particular project was completely different from how I outline and I put everything on cards and it's all on the wall and I'm moving it around and I'm looking at it for weeks before I put any words on the page. What I did with this, which was incredibly helpful, was I put on each card, I put everything that I had. Like I had a white Jeep, I had a cabin in the woods. I put all of those things on the
Mhm.
board and I sort of challenged myself to write using only those elements. And if I started to veer off into like a scene in a hospital, I was like, I don't have a hospital. I'm not going to write that. So it
Uh,
was a weird sort of set of limitations that I put on myself that it took a little getting used to, but once it came time to shoot, it was like, oh yeah, I've got the white Jeep, I have the cabin, like I've got
yeah,
everything
yeah.
I need, and I don't have to pay for any of it, which
Mhm.
was, kind of the point.
So, what is your development process? You mentioned on this one, it sounds like from the very start, you knew you wanted to shoot it yourself.
Yep.
But what does the development process on something like this look like? Did you send it out to the actors and get some notes from them, the other people involved in the film? Do you have some trusted writer friends? Just how did that process go on Swallowed?
Yeah, so I didn't send it to actors right away. I was writing, Mark Patton, who plays Rich. I had him in mind for that character as I was writing. I had Jenna Malone in mind for Alice because we had worked together before, and I knew that I could hopefully talk her into coming up to Maine to shoot a film. And then Jose, who plays Dom, like I had him in mind for that role. So it was kind of, I like to write with someone in mind, even if that doesn't
Mhm.
end up happening. um and then my editor, who's also a sound designer, who's I've done a bunch of projects with, I shared a lot of early drafts with him. He's sort of a trusted early reader. But on this one, it was incredibly fast. Like I've spent years working on scripts. This one I started writing in December, and by March had a draft that was, we were prepping because we
Mhm.
shot in June. So it's
Yeah.
like it's never happened that fast for me before, but this time it just
Mhm.
seemed to kind of speed along.
Yeah, yeah. How do you approach screenplay structure? There's sort of the Blake Snyder, Sid Field templates where they have very strict, turning points and act breaks and stuff. How do you approach screenplay structure, especially something like this that's sort of an indie horror film?
Yeah, I mean, I'm normally, I will break things up into 4 acts and just make sure that those turning points are in place and sort of build out from there. This one, like I said, was a little bit different in that I didn't have an outline. I just sat down and wrote, and I just wrote whatever I ended up I sort of let the pages dictate where I went. The one thing that I did on this also, which was, the sort of the producer in me and sort of knowing what it was going to be like shooting this. I was like, okay, on a film like this, we're probably going to have to shoot 5-6 pages a day. And so I know that on any one day, I am not going to want to be at 2 locations. So every scene has to be at least 6 pages. So that we're never moved. There's no 2-page scenes. There's no 3-page scenes. It's very much was created with a schedule in mind, so that I was like, okay, we'll be 1 full day here, or we're going to do 12 pages and we're going to do 2 full days here. And that was super helpful when it came to actually scheduling the shoot.
Mm-hmm. What about genre requirements? Just taking a look at this, it felt sort of sci-fi horror, like The Fly, has that sort of things. Just what were some of the inspirations for this, and how do you approach something like this? There's the old adage, give them the same thing but different. This is certainly, in a genre. How did you give us something original, and what were sort of the other films that maybe led up to this for you?
Yeah, I think that the same but different. I think that in a lot of ways, this is like, this is a crime thriller. This is a body horror. This is like a love story. So there's elements of a lot of different types of stories. I tried to, at every point I could, sort of send these characters in a direction that they aren't expecting, and then we as an audience aren't expecting. Mm-hmm. Like there's the film unfolds sort of in real time. And so I liked the idea of the audience being in the same space as Benjamin and Dom, and like when something happens to them, we're sort of sent off in that same direction. So like I wanted it to be horrific. I wanted it to be sort of intimate and personal. I think that a lot of the films that I looked at or that I was thinking about when I was writing this weren't necessarily films that I was inspired by the content, but they were films that I was inspired by, like how the filmmakers went about making the movie, like sort of micro budget, the whole sort of mumble gore movement, with, there's a movie called Sun Don't Shine, I think it is. And like there's, or She Dies Tomorrow, and, all of these sort of like micro budget indies that just sort of defy the limitations of, their budgets to tell stories that are deeply personal and sort of affecting.
Yeah. Fascinating. How can people see Swallow? Do you know what the release schedule is going to be like? When is it going to be available?
Valentine's Day. It'll be available on, VOD and digital platforms to rent and buy. And it's like a weird, messed up.
Yeah, it sounds like the perfect movie for 2 lovers to curl up on the couch and watch.
Yeah.
What's the best way for people to keep up with what you're doing? Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, anything you're comfortable sharing, I will put in the show notes.
So my Instagram is all_the_dead_boys. Okay. It's one of them. There's also Carter Bedlow Smith, but and then you can, I do a little like weird, dark, sexy newsletter on Fridays called Dirty Little Fridays, which people can sign up for at allthedeadboys.com.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, we'll link to all of that. And I'd just like to end the interview. Is there anything you've seen recently, HBO, Netflix, Hulu, that you can recommend to our screenwriting audience? What have you been watching that you thought was really great?
It's not, it's maybe not a traditional screenwriting thing. I am in love with this movie, The Outwaters, which is a found footage. Like I'm not a found footage fan normally, but I think that there's something about The Outwaters and found footage specifically that I'm kind of fascinated by, and sort of curious about what that process is like of writing a film like that, or letting it unravel and unfold sort of in real time.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. Yeah, that's a great recommendation. So, Carter, thank you for coming on and chatting with me. Good luck with this film, and good luck with all your future films as well.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. We'll talk to you later.
Yeah.
Bye. A quick plug for the SYS Screenwriting Analysis Service. It's a really economical way to get a high-quality professional evaluation on your screenplay. When you buy our 3-pack, you get evaluations at just $67 per script for feature films and just $55 for teleplays. All the readers have professional experience reading for studios, production companies, contests, and agencies. You can read a short bio on each reader on our website, and you can pick the reader who you think is the best fit for your script. Turnaround time is usually just a few days, but rarely more than a week. The readers will evaluate your script on 6 key factors: concept, character, structure, marketability, tone, and overall craft, which includes formatting, spelling, and grammar. Every script will get a grade of pass, consider, or recommend, which should help you roughly understand where your script might rank if you were to submit it to a production company or agency. We can provide an analysis on features or television scripts. We also do proofreading without any analysis. We will also look at a treatment or outline and give you the same analysis on it. So if you're looking to vet some of your project ideas, this is a great way to do it. We will also write your logline and synopsis for you. You can add this logline and synopsis writing service to an analysis, or you can simply purchase this service as a standalone product. As a bonus, if your screenplay gets a recommend or a consider from one of our readers, you get to list the screenplay in the SYS Select database, which is a database for producers to find screenplays and a big part of our SYS Select program. Producers are in the database searching for material on a daily basis, so it's another great way to get your material in front of them. As a further bonus, if your script gets a recommend from one of our readers, your screenplay will get included in our monthly Best Of newsletter. Each month we send out a newsletter that highlights the best screenplays that have come through our script analysis service. This is a monthly newsletter that goes out to our list of over 400 producers who are actively looking for material. So again, this is another great way to get your material out there. So if you want a professional evaluation of your screenplay at a very reasonable price, check out www.sellingyourscreenplay.com/consultants. Again, that's sellingyourscreenplay.com/consultants. On the next episode of the podcast, I'm going to be interviewing writer and director Corey Deshawn. He has a great story. He was just a kid with a dream when he moved to Hollywood, and he just started networking, getting low-level PA jobs in the industry, worked his way up, started writing in television, and now has a new feature film out called Daughter, starring Casper Van Dien. So keep an eye out for that episode next week. That's the show. Thank you for listening.